Well, Levi was a full-on Luciferian Satanist. He's the guy who designed the Baphomet image with the goat-headed god with the flame above his head.
Let's talk about him when we get back and the newest film, Eye of the Phoenix. Chris Pinto is our guest. Again, you can get all three of these amazing films at Infowars.com while you're ordering, pre-ordering. It ships next week. Fall of the Republic premieres October 21st at prisonplanet.tv. We'll be right back with Chris Pinto. Chris Pinto is our guest. The elite of the planet worship Lucifer. And that's a fact. And they're now revealing a lot of this even on mainstream television, but twisting it. Let's go back to Chris Pinto, the filmmaker. Chris, get into this individual who you're saying the last 200 years is one of the main progenitors of the rise of the Luciferian religion.
Yeah, Eliphas Levi. He's probably the most influential guy, and his symbols, his information. In fact, the famous quote from Albert Pike where he says, "Lucifer, is it he who bears the light? Doubt it not." He's quoting Eliphas Levi. If you look up any kind of satanic website anywhere, not that I recommend them, but they often use that inverted pentagram with the goat head on it. Okay, Levi was the one who designed that originally. Also, the Baphomet image of the goat-headed god with the flame above his head sitting cross-legged, that's a very common satanic symbol, also designed by Eliphas Levi. Well, Levi was somebody who, when you get on the other side of the revolutionary eras, as the American and French revolutions had happened, a lot of these guys that were into the occult, who in the mystery schools, they just kept things secret, and they handed down all of their information through the oral tradition. Once the revolutions broke out, and it was no longer, people were no longer being arrested if they were involved in occultism or witchcraft and this kind of thing because of the ideas of religious freedom that were being promoted and now legalized. A lot of these guys who, were in the inner chambers of some secret conclave somewhere, they come out and they start publishing and writing what had been believed by these occult groups for centuries. And Levi was one of the first to do it. And he goes now, and the reason that he's so often imitated by the leaders now, you read the writings of Madame Blavatsky, her secret doctrine. She quotes Levi extensively. Albert Pike, same thing, infusing Levi's ideas into the Scottish Rite rituals that American presidents and judges and congressmen and so on, if you're a Scottish Rite Mason, you are going through rituals and ceremonies that have the writings and the ideas of Levi and Albert Pike interwoven in them. It's inescapable.
And so there's a change in Masonry in the last 200 years influenced by Levi.
Oh, yeah, dramatically, especially when you get into Scottish Rite Masonry. That's his big influence because Pike took so much of his work. I mean, Pike says in his writings, Albert Pike, and, we've been there. We show you the inside of the Masonic House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. We got permission to go in there and film. We interviewed Dr. Brent Morris, who's like the head of, he's the managing editor for the Scottish Rite Journal, which is like the leading Masonic magazine. But they have an Albert Pike room down below with the death mask of Albert Pike and his pipes and all of his books and everything. They have Pike buried in the wall there in the temple. They have, when you walk in, the first thing you see is a big grand hall, and at the end of the hall there's a staircase leading up to an altar, and there's a bust on the altar, and it's Albert Pike. The reason I say these things is because sometimes the Masons will try to marginalize him and say he's not that important because he has all these quotes pertaining to Lucifer. And it was Pike who said that the entire purpose of Masonry is a continual progression toward the light. Okay, and that's the big thing. They're always talking about light and going toward the light. And then Pike says in his writings, Lucifer, is it he who bears the light? Doubt it not. So what they're leading their members toward, whether they know it or not, is ultimately toward the full-on worship of Lucifer.
And by the way, George Washington, as you know, before he died, spoke out against this. A lot of other senior Masons did. But you talk to low-level Masons, they're like, oh, my rituals have nothing to do with this. You can show them Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike. You can show them Manly P. Hall. These are the big grand Masons of the last 200 years, and they just won't look at it. They're in denial.
Yeah, they are, and what they've done is they used to give everybody, Alex. They would give them Pike's book, Morals and Dogma. Then they stopped doing that, I think, because it was just too controversial. Now they give the Masons another book called A Bridge to Light, okay, which is like a smaller book, and it's edited by some other modern Mason. But what they've done, the entire book, even A Bridge to Light, is just like the Cliff Notes of Albert Pike's writings. It's an abbreviation of his writings. And I think that is done possibly to deceive some of these Masons so that they don't think that they're being directly involved with Pike's Luciferianism, but there's no way around it. He is interwoven in Scottish Rite Masonry. And I've been to lodges, I've visited lodges out in California and so on where you walk inside. I confronted some Masons out in California out there, and they tried to get me to, well, come down to the lodge and just visit us one day, and you'll see. And so I said,
well, stay there. I want to hear about what happened with this confrontation with Chris Pinto straight ahead.